G'day, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Chinese MiG-21, the J-72, to prove that China is indeed number one. Yes, well, the J-72 was actually not a bad plane. It's pretty damn good as far as the new jets go. I would pretty much put it on par with the T-2 and kind of with the other MiG-21. It does have an extra gun, and I am told that it is supposedly a licensed copy of a different variant, but honestly, it makes a little difference. Sure, you have an extra gun, but does that really make you better? Well, we're going to find out. This particular battle is one of those mixed battles, and I'm not terribly fond of mixed battles, but, so it goes, and that's what we have to deal with. What I'm going to do here is pretty straightforward. I'm going to rush in. And one of the reasons why one of the reasons why it's good to rush in most cases is if you have a teammate behind you or one or two teammates behind you. The enemies that turn around for you and try and chase you, fire a couple of missiles, will end up being shot down themselves because they need to spend some time on target with the missile. They need to perhaps lose a lot of airspeed and turn around. It's generally very, very unwise to do a 180 for the first plane you see. What you've got to do is you've got to make sure that everything is in place for you to engage an enemy. Otherwise, your positioning will be out. Otherwise, you may be caught out by something that you don't see. And whilst this happens all the time to me, it happens less than other players that I see just sort of lemming training after a single jet, and they just get shot down. And, if I'm the one doing the kills and getting the kills, I don't really mind. But being on the end that's being chased is really frustrating. And you can see I'm not exactly putting it into a perfect rush. That is because in this exact time, the team isn't really going to, rush in at the deck. They're going to go for a climb. Everyone on the team goes for a climb, and everyone on the enemy team goes for a climb as well. So what I'm doing is I'm positioning myself to be available to pitch up and shoot someone down, or perhaps even, make them turn so that they're easier food for someone else. But you can see the first couple of F-100s have decided to YOLO in, one of them crashes, and the other will soon be shot down pretty quickly. In this case, it tends to be that numbers will win. If you have the numbers, and then if you don't have the numbers, if you have the endurance, you will tend to win. Or if everyone's there's a skill gap or something like that, then the person with the most skill, obviously. But with the J7, you kind of have the same thing that you have with the MiG-21. You don't have that endurance. You really don't. Despite having an extra 20 mil, you still have 60 rounds per gun. And whilst that's less than the MiG-19 with 70 rounds per gun, it's still not that bad. It's really, really not that bad. A lot of people go, 60 rounds, it's not good enough, it's not good. Sure, it doesn't have the endurance. It can't sustain a fight as long as an F-100. But this kind of plane is designed for single one-on-one engagements, or 2-on-2s, or 4-on-4s. Nothing more and nothing less. And so what I'm doing is I'm basically trying to single out players and trying to separate them from the fight. You can see this F4 Phantom here. Looks like he's going for a turn on me, so I'm getting into position using that delta wing to bleed speed so I can turn, and I miss. Which is fine, because it gives me another shot, and this F4 seems to want a dogfight. But what he's failed to realize is that the F4 has much better energy retention, and so I'm able to sneak in and get that nice little kill. By bleeding a lot of energy, I reduce my turning circle, because roughly speaking, your turning circle is a product of your velocity, and that means if you go fast, you generally speaking have a larger turning circle, generally speaking. So what I've done here is I've eliminated the F4. There's still a MiG-19, there's still a fair few F4s and MiG-21s on the board, there's a couple of F-100s, and what I'm looking at doing now is sort of diving onto one, ducking in behind at 6, keeping up my speed, and either forcing it to turn with a missile, shooting it down with a missile, or somehow initiating a dogfight, some sort of interdiction. And you can see here, I'm looking at doing exactly that on that MiG-21, but the F-100 comes in and I'm not pitching vertical when there is an F-100 behind me. You just don't do that. I've seen so many times where F-100s or even in lower tier jets with F-86s, people starting a lemming train where one person will go into a vertical, an enemy will chase it, and a friendly will chase the enemy, and an enemy will chase the second friendly. It's ridiculous. I don't understand why people bother. It's such a lousy way to dogfight, and it's such a really, really easy way to get yourself shot down. This MiG-21 here is not exactly doing that, and I'm refusing to do that. So what I do is I prep a missile, send it on the way, and I get a nice little critical hit. I checked it out in the replay, and it turns out that I took one of his elevators off and heavily damaged his right wing. So, I can't really complain, but the second missile finishes him off, and that is exactly what you use missiles for. You don't use them to get kills, you use them to force a turn, or to deal critical damage, or to finish off crippled enemies. The reason why you don't is because they're not strong enough at this stage. The AIM-9Bs, the R3Ss, the R13Ms, and then finally the AIM-9Es are really not designed as killing machines in War Thunder. Sure, in real life that's exactly what they were designed for, but these missiles are mainly for causing enemies to either bleed speed or to finish off low speed enemies, or, as you saw in the MiG-21 video, making sure that enemies can't get away by shooting them down. Now, you get to a situation in the J7 where you have no missiles and you are starting to run low on ammunition. This head-on wasn't exactly the smartest thing, but the missiles honestly are the MiG-21's best friend. If I had maybe known that I had shot his tail off, I probably wouldn't have gone for the second missile. Chances are I would have tried to initiate a dogfight, and that would have resulted in the MiG-21 going into an uncontrollable spin. So, why do I say this? Well, let me introduce you to this F4C, this wonderful person who will pretty much just do the same thing over and over and over and over. He tries to go for the turn fight, realizes he can't win it, so he books the hell out of there and makes sure that he keeps his speed up, which is smart. He is playing his plane smart, but he hasn't really been a big factor in many engagements. You can see he's not exactly on top of the team, and he hasn't really been doing a whole lot. Sure, maybe he's just playing a bit safe, and maybe waiting for a couple of opportunities to come up, and they just haven't materialized. That's understandable, but at the same time, his team started to fall apart about 2 minutes ago. He wasn't there, and, it doesn't really take that long to get across the map. This MiG-19 here is sweating bullets and absolutely working his ass off to try and get the F-100, and I believe that's a MiG-21, but I can't quite read it. And then I've joined the fight. It's like, what does he do? There is nothing he can do, and he's got no support. His support, in fact, died earlier on in the match, and no one was there to keep him up. So what does he do? He just basically, look, he can't do anything. It's basically down to how bad is my aim, and I'm just going to wait for him to put himself into a sustained turn instead of sort of jerking around the place. And there we go. I get myself a nice little kill. The way you work the guns with the MiG-21 and the J7 as well is basically do not use them anywhere beyond 600 meters. Even though they're really high velocity, the high velocity is to compensate for the speed. It's not really to compensate for the distance that you'll be firing at compared to, say, a 50 caliber machine gun. What you do is you use your missiles to force these jets into a turning engagement, and then you absolutely hemorrhage your own speed to sit behind them. You don't even need an air brake. You don't need to zero throttle. You just turn. And that is one of the interesting things about how the direction that top tier jets is taking. The old style of jets, the 8.0, the 8.7, the 9.0, sort of dies here because you have planes that can really pull, and then at the same time, you kind of have a situation where you've got extremely high acceleration and at the same time, you bleed speed. So that means that you can reduce your turning circle quite briefly, but it will put you at a disadvantage, and the MiG-21 exemplifies that perfectly. It bleeds a lot of speed, it has really, really good turning characteristics because of that, and it accelerates decently quickly. The F4 Phantom, as it currently stands, seems to be, from an outsider perspective, on the older side of the way jets used to work. That's why I had a lot of trouble with the Hunter F6, for example, because it just didn't pull like all the other jets. And I was having really, really major issues with F100s and basically getting sort of stuck with them behind me and unable to shake me. With the F4 Phantom, I don't feel like that's really the case because the MiG-21 bleeds so much speed in its turns, whereas the Hunter keeps a lot of it. So perhaps the F4C, in its situation, also having the acceleration that it does and the climb rate that it does, being able to outclimb the MiG-21 and the J7, and I believe the T2 as well, it puts everything in a really strange situation. This F4 is going to constantly run, and he's going to keep running, and he's going to try and strafe the airfield, and he's just going to be an overall cancer. So I'm going to be glad when I manage to put him in the dirt finally, and rub his head in, so to speak. But at the same time, it's kind of speaks to the situation of the F4. It's not really in a great spot, and that's partially because I don't really see it having the same acceleration. I need to try it out myself, but at the same time, I feel like I don't want to touch it because it just doesn't look fun. I really don't like the gun placement for a start, and that's going to throw me off. The fact that it sort of sways and sort of rotates around the reticle as opposed to the gun itself being on the reticle, it's really frustrating to me. But I guess there's only so much you can do. This particular match here just sort of demonstrates that the Phantom is decent in small engagements. If you can run, if you can use friendlies, if you can bait for your team, and vice versa, your team baits for you, I feel like the Phantom would have a bit more of a go. It would have a bit more to sort of fight for, and would have a bit of a better time in general, but at the same time, I'm not really sure that the F4C is up to scratch. In saying that, I'm enjoying fighting them. I'm enjoying fighting F100s in this thing, and I think the F100 is actually quite capable in comparison. So, if you're looking for an adversary for the MiG-21, the F100D is actually not bad. It's actually pretty good, and honestly, I think that it's kind of fine facing the MiG-21. The thing is, if the Phantom was a little bit better, we would have a much better balance because the MiG-19 is extremely strong at the moment, and from what I'm told, it may not have correct drag coefficients, but at the same time, I'll see what I can do, and I'll, make the most of a situation. The F4, in this case, has managed to get himself really nice and slow, and that has allowed me to come in with a nice little kill shot. It's a real shame that he had to go and strafe people on the runway, but if you play your endurance, if you play very safe, and if you don't use your guns unless you know you're going to get a kill, the MiG-21 and the J7 are actually quite formidable. They're actually quite strong. And I really, really like the way that they play. It's just a very, very nice matchup, honestly. The J7, the F100, the MiG-19, honestly, I feel like the MiG-19 and the F100 are now pretty comparable. I'll make a video on that later, but honestly, I think it'll wait. I think time will tell. The J7 is quite competent, and honestly, it's fun. Anyway, ladies and gents, thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.